Texas Math Mundo audience, are we in store for a spectacular treat today? In the house is CEO and founder of The Art of Problem Solving, Mr. Richard Rusczyk. The Art of Problem Solving is the premier gathering place for aspiring problem solvers and mathematicians, and it offers a myriad of services. I am so pleased to bring you an interview with Mr. Richard Rusczyk. Let me take a quick moment and ask that if you enjoy this content, that you please hit the subscription button and the notification bell, that you leave a comment below, and that you smash that like button. Let's spread this joy, let's spread this beauty to as many people as possible. Mr. Richard Rusczyk, CEO, founder of The Art of Problem Solving, right ahead. My name is Saul Katu, and this is Texas Math Mundo. Audience, are we in store for a spectacular treat? In the house, founder and CEO of The Art of Problem Solving, Mr. Richard Rusczyk. The Art of Problem Solving is the premier place for aspiring mathematical problem solvers to gather and pursue their interests. The website offers a suite of books that has an unsurpassed curriculum for aspiring mathematicians, starting as early as elementary school with Beast Academy. According to the website, they have nearly 1 million members, over 1.6 million topics on the site, over 19.3 posts on the site. The site offers a variety of services for the most talented and skilled aspiring mathematical problem solvers, including online math classes, programming classes, Olympiad level classes, forums, books, real-time competitions, and more. In recent years, the website has stepped up during the COVID-19 pandemic to host major mathematics and science competitions, including the AMC, the American Mathematics Competitions, the AMY, the American Invitational Mathematics Examinations, the USAMO, the United States Mathematical Olympiads, the Putnam Competition, the F=MA Examination, the USA Bio Olympiad, and Math Counts. Our guest is one of the co-creators of the Mandelbrot competition. He's the director of the USA Mathematical Talent Search. He founded the San Diego Math Circle, creator of Math Counts Minis on the Math Counts website, where he explains problems and concepts. He is the author of several books geared toward Olympiad preparation with an unsurpassed curriculum, including co-writer of the original Art of Problem Solving books, Pre-Algebra, Introduction to Algebra, Introduction to Geometry, and many others. He is a former competitor himself, a former Math Counts participant, 3-time participant in the Math Olympiad summer program. In 1989, he was a USA Mathematical Olympiad winner. He has many awards, including in 2012, the Math Counts Distinguished Alumnus Award. In 2014, he received the World Federation of National Mathematics Competitions Paul Erdős Award. He's been highlighted in many media outlets, including The New Yorker. Quanta magazine called him the math evangelist who preaches problem solving, and several YouTube features. So you can imagine how happy, how pleased, how humble I feel that Mr. Richard Rusczyk is here as our guest. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it's great to see you again.
Oh, and I was right. That was such an impressive resume, and I was keeping it short because I know it's much longer than that. I know it's much longer. So let's start off by asking, how are you doing? What are you up to nowadays?
I'm doing all right. I mean, AoPS has grown to, we've got 230, 240 full-time people and 800 or 1,000 part-time people. I'm working in a variety of capacities. So what I'm doing is spending a lot of time in meetings, a lot of time writing emails, and a lot of time working with others to build teams.
Well, that must consume you. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, when not engaged in work, how do you spend your free time? What are your hobbies and interests?
I don't have free time. To the extent I do have free time, my wife and I spend a lot of time outdoors. So whether that's a lot of hiking. So we go up in the mountains, out in the desert. We do a little bit of travel throughout the American Southwest. So that's probably number one. And I exercise a lot because your body's connected to your brain, and try to teach all the kids this as well. Is staying in shape helps you focus, helps you find new ideas, helps you separate a little bit from all the noise that's going on. So I find that's been more and more important as I've gotten older.
Well, from appearances, you're looking strong and fit.
Thanks.
Hey, so let's add. I want to get a little bit to your past because I'm so impressed with all that you've accomplished. I want to know, where are you from, born and raised, and what is your cultural heritage?
So my dad was in the Navy. So I'm from all over the place, and your Navy trivia buffs will have to figure this one out. I was born in Idaho Falls, and my dad was in the Navy. So the folks from the naval background will recognize that he was a nuclear engineer. There's a power school up there. So we traveled around the West Coast, traveled around the East Coast. He left the Navy when I was in late elementary school, then lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then went to high school in Decatur, Alabama, which is where my parents still are. So I'm from all over the place. My dad's family, his grandparents came over from Poland. My mom's family, most of her family came over in the 1800s from Ireland. So that's the farther back heritage.
So where do you call home?
San Diego.
San Diego.
This is by far the longest I've lived anywhere. My wife and I have lived here for about 24 years now.
Wow. When did you realize that you had a talent for mathematics?
I guess it was probably through math competitions. I was always interested in math and I enjoyed school. But early, when I was very young, the thing I loved most was reading. And my parents just fed me lots of books. My mom was a first grade teacher, and I was born when she was 22. I was the first in her group of Navy wives. She was the first in her group of Navy wives to have a child. So I spent a lot of time in roomfuls of women talking to me a lot. So I heard a lot of words when I was little, and I had a lot of people who were trying to teach me how to read. So I learned how to read pretty early, and that really has stayed with me. But then in middle school, my mom read about this new competition that had just come out called Math Counts. And so she went to the school and she said, I think Richard will really like this. And I had a teacher there who pulled together a team. We went to the competition, and my mom was right. As much as it pains me to admit that, I can admit that now. Mom was right, and I really did enjoy it. I met all of these students who were interested in a lot of the same things I was interested in. I couldn't solve all the problems, but I felt like this was a space where I could learn. I could discover mathematics that I wasn't seeing in my classroom. And I could encounter a lot of students that would, produce and create a culture around me in which I would really thrive. I wouldn't have put it in those words at the time. I just liked playing with everybody. But I was a very competitive kid. But my school, the big competitive thing was basketball. And I'm 5'7" now, and then I'm probably about 4 feet tall. So basketball was not in my future. But math competitions, I felt like that was a place I could compete.
So there was a lot of nurturing. And as we get older, it becomes less hard to admit that mama was right.
Yes.
Who were your inspirations as a youth?
As a youth, that's hard to say. I mean, definitely parents and grandparents, and just kind of watching the way that they navigated the world. You learn a lot from that. And I don't know that I would be able to point at individual like famous people or anything like that were notable for me.
Okay. What do you remember most about those years during your competitive youth?
I mean, just kind of some of my journey in my approach to math competitions, like really changed throughout middle and high school. And what I valued in competitions changed a lot as I went through middle and high school, and then even more beyond that. So when I started, I approached math competitions the same way a lot of students do. I had lots and lots of formulas. I had a big stack of formula sheets, and I would spend a lot of time memorizing formulas. So I knew lots of math. And when you're 14, your processor's pretty good. My processor is not so good anymore, but you can remember a lot of things and you can execute on a lot of things very quickly up to a point. So this worked fine in the easier competitions, the entry level competitions, although it did take me several years before I could win any of those competitions. So it wasn't like I walked in the door, I got first place on everything. I didn't get my first place trophy for a math competition until about 3 years in, except for a couple competitions for talking about math. And that should have been a sign for what I would eventually do. But I think through that is just this learning this, hey, if I keep working at something, I'll get there. Meanwhile, I'm starting to meet lots and lots of people and starting to find what I would describe as my people, the geeks. Yeah. There were some in high school, there were a few, but there weren't many who were the type that are going to spend Saturday afternoon working on an interesting math problem, or spend Friday evening coding up a video game instead of playing a video game. Back when I was a kid, the only way you could play a video game was to build it first. So I think those are two real strands is kind of how I developed learning, discipline, and building friendships. Like many of my closest friends now are people I competed against in high school. Maybe then we weren't real close friends because we were competing. Some of them were still close friends. Some of them become close friends later, and people that I met through high school. But the second kind of stage of my, let's say, educational and pedagogical development came from when I went to the Math Olympiad program. So I went to the Math Olympiad program after my sophomore year. This is the program that you get invited to after passing the various AMC exams. And back when I was a student, they would take the top 24-ish students to this training program. And they would take the top 6 and put them on the U.S. team. I'm coming out of Alabama to this camp, and I'm thinking, I don't know anybody from Alabama who has been invited to this camp before, so I must be the smartest person in the world. I was 15. Then I went to the camp, and I'm there for 5 weeks, and we have practice tests every other day, 3 problems, 4 problems, 3 or 4 hours, and I got exactly none correct.
Wow.
So I was not the smartest kid in the world. Spent the next year learning more and more formulas because I was going to learn more math like those other kids knew, and I was going to get back to the camp and I was going to show them what I could do. Got back to the camp, every other day there's a practice test, 3 or 4 problems, 3 or 4 hours, and once again, still problems. So I had to spend the whole next year rebuilding my approach to hard problems. And the big difference at this top level between that and everything I had done before was I could get through your local and state competitions and even the AMC back then by just seeing lots of problems and pattern matching and my big stack of formulas. That was enough. By the time I got to the Olympiad problems, well, these problems didn't look anything like anything I'd seen before. So in order to solve them, I had to really understand the tools that I was using. I couldn't just riffle through my formulas, apply the formula, solve the problem. So I had to go back to my formulas, big stack of formula sheets. Instead of knowing more formulas, I needed to know fewer and be able to develop the mathematics I needed when I needed it. This was where I first, I think, started to think like a mathematician, and definitely where I first really started becoming a problem solver and thinking about how to approach problems I've never seen before. And that transition, it took the whole year just going through trying to prove each formula. I couldn't always do it. But by the end of the year, I could solve some of these problems. And that's why I was an Olympiad winner. I was an alternate for the U.S. team. I still was definitely not the smartest kid in the universe, very far from it. But I had learned how to approach problems that I'd never seen before. And that would later inspire what we do now.
A couple of things of note. That was pre-internet days, so it was harder to find a community of people, of like-minded people. And there was no art of problem solving. So trying to get a conceptual understanding of the mathematics to propel you forward must have been quite a task. You really had to want it.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And that's something I talk about a lot when I talk with students is in high school, I had a lot of time. So I had to figure out what my goals were, develop a plan to approach those goals, and develop the discipline to stay on plan and reach those goals.
Yeah, wow. So where did you go to college and what did you major in?
I went to Princeton and I majored in chemical engineering. So I definitely deviated from the math path for a while.
But did that competitive math journey help you in that path?
Absolutely. So when I went off to Princeton, I went to a high school in northern Alabama that I like to describe as aggressively average. Maybe 2/3, 3/4 of us graduated, maybe 15, 20% of us went straight to a 4-year college. And most of the students stayed in state or maybe went to Mississippi. So for me to go off to Princeton, I was worried about competing against students that went to schools like Stuyvesant, one of the big magnet schools, or went to a private school like Exeter. I was worried that they would have training that I didn't have. So when I get to Princeton, I'm a little bit worried. And then right from the beginning, it was clear that I had it backwards. I had training they didn't have.
Wow. Because
in college, the tests, 3 or 4 problems, they don't look anything like the homework. It was exactly like the Olympiads that I needed 2 years to figure out how to get anywhere on. So I'd already had this training for how to confront that challenge. But in most schools, the tests in high school and in middle school, the tests look exactly like the homework, just with the numbers changed.
Wow.
Even in the fancy schools, even in the magnet schools, unless you have a very special teacher, that's going to be your experience. The test is repeating and regurgitating knowledge. It is not designed the way math and science classes are designed in any solid university class. So I walked in the door already knowing how to confront these challenges. And what I discovered was the knowledge of how to do that, the training for how to do that transfers. And it wasn't just math that I found relatively easy compared to my peers who hadn't had this experience. Physics, economics, engineering, computer science, philosophy, anything that required combining basic ideas to solve challenging, novel problems. I had that skill walking in the door, but a lot of my classmates didn't and would have to develop it during college. And a lot of them didn't. A lot of them chose instead, they hit that wall, that first math class, that first physics class. They take the first series of exams, they get a 42 out of 100, which is actually a pretty decent score in these exams, but they decide they're not good enough. And they pull out of math, they pull out of physics, and they close doors behind them as they go. And instead, I didn't have to go through that. I didn't have to go through 2 years of these kind of humbling experiences and figure out how to do it. In college, I did that in math competitions. A nice safe space. Who really cares if you win a trophy or not in the long run? Whereas in college, the stakes are higher.
Yes.
That's what math competitions did for me.
Wonderful insight. As a high school teacher, I can tell you, yeah, often it is regurgitation, but that's what the competitive mathematics does, man. It teaches you how to reason and problem solve at a whole new level. That's awesome. So when did you first have the vision of the art of problem solving?
I'll walk through how we got here. So when we started at Princeton, I pulled in a couple of my colleagues, Sam Vanderveld and Chandra Lahosky. These were people that I competed against in math competitions. I met Sam at the Math Olympiad program. He was a 2-time Olympiad winner, and he was on the IMO team in 1989, and he's one of the founders, and he's the head of school at Proof School in San Francisco. Chandra Lahosky, he and I competed all through high school in Alabama. He's a year younger than I am. We were not particularly friendly until near the end of high school. And I think this is part of what I talked about before, is kind of changing my attitudes towards math and even towards competitions going through high school. I was very competitive at the beginning of high school. I was less competitive by the end of high school. Chandra and I would become friends afterwards, after both of us became a little bit less competitive, and we became colleagues instead of competitors. one of the ways we became colleagues was through the three of us built the Mandelbrot competition. So this is a mail-in competition where we would write tests. We'd send them out to the students. Teachers and students would send their stuff back. And the scores initially were very, very low because we assumed all the students out there knew the same math that we did, which was very not fair because we were 4 years older than they were. So we were confronted with a decision. We could do one of two things. We could either do what the American education system usually does in this situation, which is make the tests easier and then the scores go up, or we could try to teach the students. So one day, Shandor and I were just walking down the street at Princeton. He went to Princeton as well. And he said, you know what? We should write a book. And I said to Shandor, I've got 200 pages of a book handwritten on sheets of paper. I just don't know how to turn it into a book. And Shandor said, I'll figure out the technical details and we'll get started. We'll take those notes as a starting point and we'll go from there. And that's how the original Art of Problem Solving books got started. As I was finishing my senior year of college, we had a draft of most of the first book. One book became two. We went to Princeton University Press and we went to one of the editors there and said, hey, we've got this book. Look at this cool book. Do you want to publish it? They were really excited. And this guy was very polite. He was very nice. And he explained to us very, very politely that, well, Shandor and I probably had a better reach into our market than Princeton University Press did. So we should self-publish. Now, in retrospect, I suspect what he was really saying was, nobody's going to buy a math book written by a 20-year-old kid. But he turned out to be right. We did have a better reach into our audience than Princeton University Press did. We reached out to Math Counts. We reached out to the AMC. We reached out to a few other organizations that Shandor and I had been part of as students, one of which was the USA Math Talent Search, which would come back into the AoPS orbit later. And those organizations helped us reach our first cohort of students. So that's kind of how the name got out there. But it would be 10 years before we would launch the current AoPS company.
Well, I will say, I did read both those first volumes. Those are works of art, and you tapped into a demand. Somehow you tapped into a demand that's out there for this competitive mathematics material. I first encountered you in 2006 in a small booth at the NCTM, the National Council of Teacher Mathematics Conference, and you were in the hustle and grind. And what I remember is you were so kind that you actually sent me an autographed copy of the geometry book that I bought. So I was like so pleased. But those were, you're in a small booth. Look at how far you've come, man. Has the vision evolved, and how does it continue to evolve?
Well, it certainly has evolved. I will say it's still a hustle and grind. And I do remember that conversation. Like there are not many times when I would go to the NCTM convention when I would encounter teachers who kind of really understood what we were trying to do and really understood the opportunities that these great students, that these most engaged, high potential, high interest students, the opportunities they're going to face and the opportunities we as educators have to inspire and help them achieve their potential. And I remember that just being really refreshed. Like that was really awesome. He's going to do something amazing with his kids. So I do remember that.
Thank you.
But I would say how the vision has evolved. So when you've heard the kind of origin story of AoPS, there we were focused on the kids who were really very interested in very advanced math competitions. And that's where we started when we launched the company. So I guess how we got to starting the company was after I had graduated from college, I went to grad school very briefly. I left grad school to become a high school teacher because, that's really what I wanted to do. So I walked in and started teaching high school. Well, you see me now, I'm 51. I walked in to teach high school when I was 22. You can imagine what I looked like. I looked younger than most of the students did, and kind of instilling the sort of discipline that some of the classrooms might have needed. That might have been a challenge. The students that were like me, I could reach. Like I could empathize with them. I understood where they were. I understood what they were capable of. I also had 4 remedial classes, and there were some of those students in those classes as well. Like there were some students in those classes before that I believe teachers hadn't seen that potential. and been able to draw it out, or maybe they'd seen it and just didn't know what to do to draw it out. There were a handful of kids in those classes. The other students, the ones who had already given up on being interested, I couldn't reach them. I might have been too young. I might not have been mature enough. I might just not have had the skills to do that. And it is a real skill to be able to reach those students. So after that semester of high school, I decided it was just too hard teaching high school, and went and did something easier, which was trading bonds. I did that for 4 years. And then after I left that, I started kind of exploring and building web pages. And I started teaching a couple students, one local in San Diego, one farther away, that I would teach in a chat room. And then one day I got the two of them together, put them both in a chat room together, and it was magical just watching these two students talk to each other, and sometimes talk to me, but mostly to each other. And I started to think, what would happen if we started bringing together larger groups of this? If we could build a school and a community that is just for the students that I felt I could best serve. The students who had the same sort of love of mathematics that I did as a student, and who maybe didn't have access to a community, didn't go to Stuyvesant where they had lots of, where there's 20 or 30 or 50 of them, but were instead at a small school, or my school wasn't that small, but it was a school that didn't send lots of kids off to events like these. So we stood up the website, started a community. The original AoPS books helped launch that community, because I could reach out through Math Counts, through the AMCs, through ARML, and say, hey, can you let people know about this website where the kids can talk to each other? And it turns out there are a lot of these students out there who think they're alone, but they're not. And they don't realize that 10 years later, when they're 23, by then, they'll have found a whole world of students, of people who are interested in things. They're building amazing companies. They are, researching amazing topics. There are lots of these people out there. But when you're 13, it sure doesn't feel like that. And that community became kind of the center of AoPS, bringing all of these kids together. And we started the online school at about the same time, so that we could teach the segment of students that we felt we could best serve. And we started with the contest students, but that quickly broadened to being a full curriculum for high-performing, high-potential, high-interest math students. So it's designed specifically for them. Because once you get to high school, the kids really spread out. You're a teacher, this. They spread out a lot in terms of what they're really interested in, where they're going to spend their time, their prior experience, all of these things. So you can't build a high school curriculum that's going to serve that whole spectrum. Can't be done. And most of them, most of your curricula, they have to aim at enough of this curve that they can get into the schools. Well, that wasn't our target. So we could aim at this kind of, the right tail of the distribution, and build a curriculum that's designed just for our future scientists, our future mathematicians, our future problem solvers. We started with middle and high school, and then after we finished that up, we started looking towards elementary school, and that's the Beast Academy curriculum. So there again, we're just drawing bigger and bigger circles. So with Beast Academy, I came to think of it as retaining a student's interest in learning, and retaining a student's kind of resilience and problem-solving ability. Because little kids, that's how they encounter the world. That's how they learn about the world. If you look at 4-year-olds, 4-year-olds can't really do a whole lot, but they see adults doing these amazing things. We're shooting a basketball, we're riding a bike, we're chopping vegetables, and they want to do it too. But they can't because they're 4. Yeah. They're going to try. They're going to try anyway. But they'll still fail because they're still 4, and they'll get really upset. They'll quit. They'll run away, but then they'll do something really amazing, and it'll happen really quickly. They'll come back, maybe in 10 minutes, forget about the previous failure because they're 4, and they haven't learned yet how to quit forever. And somewhere between when they're 4 and when they're 18, we train this toughness out of them. Specifically, we train it out of them in our math classes, by teaching them that math is just a set of techniques to just be mastered and gotten 100% correct, instead of a space to explore and try new things and learn new things. We stop treating mathematics as the beautiful space that it is, the beautiful exploratory experience that it is, the beautiful exploratory experience that 4-year-olds happily confront every single day as they explore the world, and turn it into something that's dry and boring and something that computers already do really well. So this is what we were trying to do and have done with Beast Academy, is create this sort of experience for elementary school students so we can retain that natural toughness and curiosity as they explore the world of mathematics.
Awesome. I will say, I've just completed my 24th year of teaching, and I've read several of your books, and they're pure gold. That curriculum in my books is unsurpassed. And I will say, that geometry book you signed held a place of honor in my library for many years until I gifted it to one of my gifted students. You know what I'm saying? So I passed it to him. But it's gold. And what I love is not only old school books, that's the core, old school books, but you've innovated. You're leveraging today's modern technology to promote your message, to promote mathematics. So you've really stepped up with the math competitions. Is that a form of you giving back?
Absolutely. So what happened during the pandemic? I mean, you remember you were there, but the math competitions, most of them operate in person, on the ground, whether it's in schools or it's like math counts where they bring the kids together. The pandemic happens, they can't operate at all. Now, these events were very important to me as a student. They really formed the foundation of my education, and not just in math, as I described earlier. So when I heard, obviously all the contests are going to shut down, I reach out and talk to math counts and talk to AMC. And then eventually the physics crowd got involved and the biology crowd got involved and just said, hey, we can help you. And they also realized not only can we help them because we have a lot of engineers and we have a lot of their alumni who will really love working on this project, we also already have a lot of their students. So something like 80% of the AIME qualifiers were already starting on art of problem solving, and nearly 100% of the Olympiad qualifiers. So we've already got the kids. They already understand how the site works. So we can stand up these events and allow these competitions some continuity through the pandemic, because it was very challenging for them to get through that. And the competitions have gotten smaller as a result of the pandemic, but not as much smaller as they would have if they'd had to shut down for a couple of years.
Wow. So do you continue to envision evolving as the technologies change?
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to evolve in terms of technology and in terms of subjects. So we started building out a language arts experience when we started opening learning centers around the country. We took over an existing learning center that was using our materials, but it also had a language arts program, and we've since kind of revamped that and made it our own. And we've started opening more of these learning centers. So now we have a language arts program. We started a physics program when we hired one of the lead coaches of the U.S. physics team, joined us to start building out physics, and we've since added some more people to the science team, and we're starting a science strand of Beast Academy as well. We recently hired a computer science director, so we're going to try to build for computer science what we've built for math. One of the things that you as a very experienced teacher will say, well, that's obvious, Richard. Of course, that's true. One of the things that I've learned while doing AoPS is kids learn in very different ways. When I was a student, give me a book, put me in a corner, I'm good. But a lot of kids, they need something different. Some of them need social experiences. Some kids need a social in-person experience, which is a bit of what I got in math competitions, but that's what the learning centers can provide. Some of the kids need to learn a lot from videos. I've made over 1,000 math videos. I don't like learning from videos. I think of myself when I'm making videos as doing PR for math, and that's kind of fun. But there are some students who do really, they want to hear, they want to watch, they want to put themselves in spaces. So kind of emotionally, mentally. Kids online will learn with different delivery mechanisms. So we have one online school that's video and audio like this. We have another online school that we've been running our original online school that is, there's no audio, there's no video. It's all text and images. And you have to really experience it to appreciate it. But all the kids can talk all the time. But the communication comes just to the teachers, and the teachers pick and choose what to share with the room, where to engage with students privately, so they can really manage the experience, but give all the students the experience they need. So students have a lot of options, and we have our online community. We have a couple learning systems, one for older students, one for younger students. So we deliver our resources in a lot of different lanes. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've built a really robust engineering team so we can build more lanes as technologies become available.
Well, I think about you in that small booth in 2006. I think about how far you've come. It's been a remarkable journey. Were there any figures you want to shout out that might have been pivotal on this journey? Or is there too many? Too many?
There are a lot. I like for all the people that have been part of it, and that is all the people who have worked here and been part of AoPS. That list is way too long. Obviously, all the students, all the families we've worked with, but a few individuals that I would call out. My math team coach from high school, Gwen Snoddy, like she, at the time, I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have. I didn't realize how special it was to have a teacher who would be willing to give up 15, 20 weekends a year to drive a bunch of teenagers all over the Southeast to go to math events. And she did that for us. And at the time, I took it for granted because we'd go to events where there were other teachers from other schools who had done this. But I didn't realize how really rare that was and how it's gotten more and more rare over time. You know, fewer and fewer students have a teacher like Ms. Snoddy who was willing to invest that much time in making these opportunities available to me. For starting AoPS, there's a man, his name is Harold Reiter, and he brought me back into working in extracurricular mathematics in like 2002 or so. And like the geometry book that you mentioned before, it's dedicated to him because he brought me back into this space. And he's been a big part of all of these organizations. He ran some of the AMC tests for a while. He was a contest writer for Math Counts. I tell him sometimes my goal is to catch up to him in terms of the number of people I know in this space. And Harold's still pulling away from me. So he's still meeting new people, even though he's, he's officially retired, but he works just as much as he always did.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. So what a remarkable journey. What advice can you give young aspiring problem solvers that come across this interview?
I think a big one is protect their time. So, I mean, one of the things students now have that's just so awful that didn't really exist when I was a student was the college application rat race. You know, college application it's so competitive now, and it is for a lot of, it's a lottery to some extent, and kids feel this pressure and this strong incentive to participate in everything. So they're gonna play 2 instruments, they're gonna play a sport, they're gonna join 7 clubs, they're gonna do student government, they're gonna start their own nonprofit. They're gonna do 19 different things. And there are some rare people who can do 19 things and still do 3 or 4 of them really, really well. Most people can't. But the other thing when you're doing 19 things you don't get to do is step back and decide for yourself what you wanna do. And have the space and time to figure out how you want to do that. You know, I talked earlier about my experience in high school of this, having to set a goal, having to develop a plan to pursue that goal, and develop the discipline to stay on that plan. I was able to do that because my high school had very little homework. I only took 2 AP exams and somehow I survived. It was a different time, but I had a lot of free time to pursue my own goals. And I would hear this experience echoed when I was on an advisory board for a website that was supposed to be for the next generation of scientists. So it's supposed to be for high school students who are really interested in science. And this advisory board had some Nobel laureates on it. It had the president of MIT. I mean, it had some very successful people. And I asked a group of them once, a group of 10 or 12, and it was mostly kind of scientists and mathematicians that were in this group, what it was from their middle school and high school days that was most important for their eventual success. Every single one of them answered with something they did on their own time.
Really?
It may have started in school with the teacher handing them a book or at a club with somebody giving them a robotics kit, but it was the hours spent on Saturday afternoon in their room or over the summer hanging out with their friends, playing with ideas or doing something. It was unstructured. It wasn't for a trophy. It wasn't for a grade. It wasn't for college admissions. It was pursuing a deep, deep interest and wanting to get to the edge of understanding something that led to their eventual success. students these days do not have the time to do that. And so not only do they not get to the edge of their success, but they don't learn how to operate in a space where they're not told what the objective is and how to get there. You know, for what I do now, run a company, there's no syllabus, there's no website, there's tons of how-to manuals written by people who did not do and therefore don't know how to. We have to figure it out. We have to pull together a team and figure out how to achieve those objectives. Students don't get that opportunity because they're wildly overscheduled. So that's the thing I would recommend to students is, you know, you've been playing the piano for 6 years. You can go to mom and dad and say, 6 years of piano is enough. I'm going to do something else. And maybe nothing is the right thing to do for a little while. Take a summer off. Don't enroll in 4 camps, or just enroll in 1 and keep 2 months free, something like this. Keep that time to then go explore and figure out what it is you actually really enjoy doing.
Wow. Great perspective. How about parents? What do you got for them?
Same thing. Because sometimes here the parents are the problem, right? Sometimes the parents are the one trying to help the student build the resume. So the parents have to be willing to step back and let the kids have space, or the parents may have a role in forcing there to be space. So one of the things that my father did when I was a student, you know, a lot of parents might be trying to make sure their kids studying a lot. My dad was the opposite. I would be upstairs in my room, you know, working on an old math competition or something, writing a report for history class, and he'd come bang on the door, boom, boom, boom. And he'd be like, all right, let's go. We're going to go play tennis. And okay, Dad, I'll go play tennis. And it wasn't like my dad was trying to make me a great tennis player. By then I was 5'5". Everybody knew I was not going to be a great tennis player. And he was just trying to get me away from the books, to run around, to free my mind, so that when I did come back to the books, it would be better. I would be better. I'd be in a better state of mind. I would better be able to do that. And it helped drill in a lifelong habit. He didn't preach this to me. You know, he never explained what he was doing. It was only much later I look back and I'm like, oh, yeah, I see what he was doing there. Just helping me create space and not constantly be pushing and pushing and pushing. But by going in a different direction for a while, I was actually developing more academically by taking care of myself in other ways. And I think that's something that parents can do, but they're going to have to choose to do it because it's not natural for some parents. Some parents want to help build the resume all the way instead of, all right, let's create space. Let's take July and August. You don't have to enroll in anything. Read books. That's great. You know, if you want to sit around and read Martin Gardner books all day, that is great. So that would be my recommendation to parents.
Great stuff. You know, we're the same age, so you're incredibly young. I'm 51 too.
I like that. I like the way you think.
But already you're building a remarkable legacy. What do you hope your legacy will be, or are you way too young and too early to even contemplate that?
I don't have time to think about that. I'm too busy looking forward to look backwards.
So what does the future hold for you?
I mean, I think we have a lot of exciting things happening here at AoPS. So, you know, I mentioned before, we're starting to open more and more of these learning centers. We're going to start really developing in computer science. We are taking that Beast Academy curriculum that we've built already. We're building out science for it. But then another project we're working on for that is we are taking the curriculum that we've built, which is primarily used either by people at home. It's used by schools as a supplement for advanced learners. We're taking that and we're building all the supports around it that are needed to be able to be implemented in any classroom by any teacher, so that we can serve a much wider range of students and thereby be able to reach those students who don't have at home a first grade teacher and a nuclear engineer to give the kind of support that I had, or who didn't go to a special school, and to give them the opportunity to identify themselves and be identified as a student who has high potential and high interest, to kind of unlock the creativity and innovative spirit and innovative mathematical ability that this country has in so many students that we never see because they never get the opportunity. And this was inspired a bit by some of the nonprofit work that I've done. I started a nonprofit 19 years ago to run the USA Math Talent Search. And then we had this vehicle available, so we started building summer opportunities for underserved students in New York and Los Angeles, and now we're starting to do some national opportunities. Most of our work was with students in middle school and then supporting them through high school. And what we saw through this work, that program is called Bridge to Enter Advanced Mathematics. What we saw through that work was these students that we were working with in middle school, they were just as excited as the kids we work with at AoPS. They were just as willing to work hard. They were just as willing to identify themselves as, yes, I love math. I like solving a Rubik's Cube. They were 3 or 4 years behind in math, the students that I was working with online, because their schools didn't have the kind of support for these students, even though they were the best in their middle schools. Now, the schools didn't have the support for them in elementary school, and their families, they didn't have an engineer at home to know what to look for or to know how to guide them. So that's when I became inspired to start reaching younger and younger and younger. And now this company is at a size where we can aspire to take on these larger opportunities.
Wow. What, ambitious, but yet so beautiful of a vision. What a wonderful vision. What a wonderful vision. I will say, Mr. Richard Rusczyk, I am a little bit awestruck. I'm a little bit starstruck by you. I really you've so graciously given of your time, and I want to say a very sincere and heartfelt thank you for coming on my channel and giving me the interview. And if you're ever in Houston, I hope you consider me a friend. I'm so impressed that you remember our conversation way back in 2006. If you're ever in Houston, look me up. I know some good taco places, some good barbecue. But I really want to say a sincere thank you, and I appreciate you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. And I appreciate all the work you're doing with all your students and with this channel. You've had conversations with some very, very accomplished people, students that I've worked with as well. So it's really a wonderful thing you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Best of luck and farewell.
Thank you.
Wow, what fascinating perspective, what fascinating insight by Mr. Richard Rusczyk, CEO, founder of the Art of Problem Solving. What a wonderful, wonderful interview. Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Rusczyk. I really appreciate you giving graciously of your time. Let me take a quick moment and ask that if you enjoy this content, that you hit the subscription button and the notification bell, that you leave a comment below, and you smash that like button. I have plenty of wonderful things in store for this channel. Let's spread this joy, let's spread this beauty to as many people as possible. My name is Alcantar, and this is Texas Math Mundo. Farewell.